Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to help you climb in ranked for the last few days of patch 10.17. We'll be covering each stage of the game, which includes items, champions, compositions, economy, and at the end, the galaxies. The meta hasn't shifted a lot since 10.16, and it's primed to remain similar going into 10.18 as we're nearing the end of set 3. With all that said, let's jump on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so make sure you're following the Giant Slayer TFT social media to keep up with everything we're doing. We're also nearing 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe as we're planning something special once we hit that goal. Alright, let's get back to the video, and to start off the early game, let's talk about items. Overall, the meta is in a really healthy spot when it comes to components and completed items. There's a lot of variance in what you can play in terms of compositions and champions, which means there's a larger amount of items that are viable. Before we get into specifics, let's talk about the beginning carousel and what components are worth prioritizing. First, let's preface this by saying you're going to be able to use any component that you get from the carousel. The only component you should stay away from is the cloak, as getting double cloak early on in the game can be rough. Other than that, there's no major downsides to any of the other components. But let's focus on 3: tier, sword, and glove. Tier is one of the highest priority components because it enables a lot of champions and builds. Without tier, there's no Shojin, and without double tier, there's no blue buff, and both of those items do well in the current meta. Blue buff in particular opens up the options to play Syndra for Star Guardian Sorcerer, Teemo for Astro Sniper, and Cassiopeia for Vanguard Mystic. It's also a great item for Victor, Ziggs, and Janna, although Janna actually prefers Shojin. Basically, not having a tier can limit what you're able to play, while having at least one opens up a lot of possibilities. Next up, we have sword. Sword is, as usual, quite flexible in what items you can use for it. Shojin, Guardian Angel, Gunblade, Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Deathblade, and Giant Slayer are all usable in some capacity. Most of the time you're going to want a sword for either a damage item to give to your physical carry like Jhin, or to make a Guardian Angel, which is one of the best defensive items. And then there's the sparring glove. Glove is key for defensive items like Shroud and Quicksilver, and essential for damage items like Last Whisper, Hand of Justice, and Infinity Edge. While it is possible to get by without one, it is preferable to have at least one, as it, much like tier, opens up several possibilities. Of course, all of the items we listed aren't the only viable ones. If you find yourself with a belt, you can use it for Morellonomicon or Warmogs. Chain Vest is great for Bramble Vest, and both components turn into red buff, which is a top tier item for blasters. Rod can be used for a lot of items, as can bow. As we mentioned, the meta is flexible right now, so be willing to use multiple components. Even Cloak has use, just keep in mind its priority is much lower than the other components, as it's generally quite easy to get a Cloak at some point in the game if you really need it. With items down, we can move on to early champions and traits. As usual, this should be prefaced by saying your overall goal is to play your strongest board, which means you want to 2-star your champions. Playing for a specific champion or certain traits can be okay, but if you're presented with other options that can be upgraded, you're better off going for them. The priority is going to be to 2-star champions and then useful traits after. With that said, let's talk about 3 openings that you can look for to have a really strong early game. One such opening is Rebels with Ziggs, Malphite, and either Yasuo or Zed. From there, you can add in Alawi and Nocturne to get Brawler with Infiltrator, or play Rumble if you're lucky enough to find him early. Ziggs with Rumble is easily one of the best openings that you can have. Another strong opening is Cybernetics with Lucian, Leona, and Fiora. Lucian in general is a great 2-cost carry, whether you have Cybernetics or not. Just make sure that you're giving him carry items and pairing him with another blaster. If you're able to 2-star your 3 Cybernetics, this should result in a win streak through Stage 2 and early on into Stage 3. The last opening to talk about is Space Pirates. In general, you won't always get value from the trait because a 1-star Darius can be rather weak, but if you're able to either 2-star him or find a Jace, the amount of extra gold you can farm is definitely worth it. Space Pirates pair well with Vanguard, and while it isn't the strongest early game opening, it can earn you an economic advantage. Before we move on, there's a few standalone champions that you can look for. Ahri, like Lucian, is a great 2-cost carry. Xayah can do well as a 1-cost physical damage carry during Stage 2, and on the opposite side is Twisted Fate, who does the same thing, except he's a magic damage carry. Lastly, there's always the chance of hitting 3-cost champions. Practically any 3-cost champion can do well besides someone like Karma, as she's purely a support unit. A few 3-cost champions to look out for specifically are Rumble, Shaco, Ashe, Jace, and of course Bard. Bard's value has gone down, but he's still amazing for squeaking out an early advantage by providing you extra experience to help accelerate your economy. And our last early game section is on leveling and economy. The general flow of the game hasn't really changed for quite some time in Set 3. Overall, your goal is to be maintaining your health by leveling aggressively and playing your strongest board. Doing those two things should help you get into the mid-game with a relatively stable economy and high enough health to stabilize your board. As usual, the leveling times vary slightly, but aim to hit level 4 by 2-2. This will make level 5 be easier to hit on 2-5 and always opens up the possibility of pre-leveling during the 2-4 carousel. Pre-leveling means hitting the level up button once you're at 8 out of 10 experience prior to 2-5 starting. That means you'll naturally level to 5 before the shop appears on that round, giving you a slight advantage as you have a chance to roll a 4-cost champion as well as increased odds to roll 3-cost champions. While you do want to save gold, it is okay to be rather poor in the early game. Winning rounds is important, or at least not losing rounds too badly. That said, you can play slower and more economic focused, but it's going to come at the cost of your health. If you're comfortable playing the mid game with lower health, this is an okay playstyle, but it's much easier to have higher health later on in the game. All right, let's now move on into the mid game. At this stage of the game, we're well into stage 3 and on our way to stage 4. The general timing for level 6 is going to be after Krugs on either 3-1 or 3-2, with 3-2 being the standard. If you're win streaking and wish to maintain it, you can level on 3-1 for a board advantage. Once we're nearing the end of stage 3, you should look to level to 7. Level 7 should happen anywhere between 3-5 and 4-1, with the standard timing being on 4-1. Any later than round 4-1, and you're going to be severely behind the lobby's leveling curve. Once you hit level 7, you've got a few options. The first option is rolling. Use your gold at level 7 to stabilize your board. Stabilizing means finding your primary carry and the champions necessary to support them. There's a lot of compositions to choose from, but a few of the stronger mid-game comps are Slash Bros, Chrono Ashe, Mech, and Star Guardian Sorcerer. It's worth pointing out that Slash Bros and Star Guardian Sorcerer can stay on level 7 to slow roll for 3-star champions. Another option on level 7, if your board is naturally strong, is to level quickly to 8 on 4-3. Once you level to 8, you'll be able to roll a bit of your gold with the intent of hitting your 4-cost upgrades and finding early 5-cost champions. A few builds that you can look to fast 8 with are Cybernetics, Astro Sniper, and Rebels. Practically any build can fast 8, but in general, it's better to roll at least a little bit of your gold on level 7 in order to stabilize. Keep in mind that during this stage of the game, you don't want to completely gut your economy. Try to maintain at minimum 20 gold and try not to dip below it. The goal of the mid game is to stabilize enough so that you're not bleeding out health constantly so that you can transition into level 8 in the late game. Speaking of level 8, the standard timing if you roll on 7 is going to be 5-1 after Raptors. It can be earlier as we mentioned, but 5-1 is a good round to aim for. One last thing to touch on is that in very rare cases, it's possible to level 9 as early as 5-1. It's not advisable in the majority of your games, but if you've been high rolling or if you've had a bard for most of the game, it may be possible to level 9 that early. And now we're moving on to that last stage, the late game. The overall goal for the late game is less about your economy and more about scouting and repositioning. Of course, you will be focused on playing the strongest board you can, but it will depend greatly on what composition you're playing. In general, though, you can break down the game into a few components: positioning, 5-cost champions, and level 9. Positioning is not an easy concept to convey as it varies greatly every single game. A simple piece of advice is to always be tracking who you've played against, scout as much as you can, and reposition your board frequently. Doing this will keep other players guessing on where your champions will be positioned. And always be aware of obvious threats like Shroud, Zephyr, Infiltrators, and Crowd Control. In particular, Blitzcrank, Gnar, Gangplank, and the Mech. 5-cost champions are your best bet late game for giving your board the largest power spike. Essentially every legendary can be useful, but Thresh, Janna, Echo, and Gangplank are some of the strongest. Urgot can be great as well, but he's better off on your bench to be pulled by Thresh. Thresh in general is fantastic because he artificially increases your board size by pulling in extra champions. The last aspect of the late game to go over is level 9. Leveling to 9 should be your goal, but it isn't always the best play. For example, if you're low on health, meaning below 30, you either have 1 or 2 lives left. Leveling to 9 is only useful if it provides a meaningful power spike to your comp in this case. Otherwise, you're better off rolling to hit upgrades that can potentially keep you alive for the next few rounds. Now, if you're healthy enough, then yes, level 9 is great. Keep in mind that you don't want to spend all of your gold to instantly go to level 9. Try to spread out the leveling just a bit so you have some gold to roll with afterwards. Overall, the best piece of advice late game is don't lose sitting on a bunch of gold. Spend your gold if you're close to losing the game. It may not win you the game, but it at least gives you a chance to stay alive for 1 or 2 more rounds and potentially turn a 5th place into something like a 4th or 3rd. Our last section for today is galaxies. Treasure Trove, Super Dense, Trade Sector, and Plunder Planet are all easy galaxies to play on, so we don't really need to cover them. The first 3 have been around for a long time now, and while Plunder Planet is new, it has an easy concept that doesn't require any additional advice. Salvage World isn't easy, but the gameplay behind it is relatively simple. Make sure you're always using your components early on champions that you're willing to sell later. Making suboptimal items is fine because you can always get the components back later. Galactic Armory is fantastic since it gives players a lot of agency with the 3 components. The only advice we have for this galaxy is that you should definitely make a few items early game to use your components so you're not behind the strength of other players. Dwarf Planet is one of the weakest galaxies because it takes away player choice by making the board smaller. Focus on playing either mech on this galaxy or ways to counter the mech, as it's the most popular composition by far for this galaxy. And always be aware of where your carry is relative to other players because crowd control can be devastating with the smaller board. Lastly, let's touch on the newest galaxy, Manatee's Delight. This is a wonderful galaxy because again, it gives choice to the players without taking anything away. You can use the spatula for a wide variety of things, including Blade Master Zed, Infiltrator Aurelia, and Protector Aurelian Soul. Alright folks, that is going to be it for today's video. We hope this breakdown of the ranked meta will help you climb in the last few days before the new patch arrives. Let us know in the comment section below how your rank climb is currently going. Thank you for watching, and as we mentioned, we're super close to 10,000 subscribers, and with that, we have some special plans once we hit that goal. So if you've been enjoying our content and want to see the future of Giant Slayer TFT videos, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button.